live.
Morning, everyone. It's December 10th, 2020, East Hampton Village Planning Board meeting coming to order. First of all, I'd like to go over, get a motion on last month's minutes, please. Everybody have an opportunity to read them?
Yes.
Yes,
I have a motion, a second?
I'll make that motion.
I have a
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Pam, can you read the application today, please?
It's a continuation of the hearing.
Mm-hmm.
And Further Farm LLC, 218 Further Lane, and EH 226 LLC, 226 Further Lane.
Do we have the applicant online here?
Yes, this is Lenny Ackerman. Good morning. First of all, I'd like to thank Pam for her continued efforts in allowing us to do this remotely under the conditions of the pandemic we're in. It's really a credit to the board, to all the village officials, the administrator, and especially to Pam, that she has done this effortlessly and made it convenient for all of us who are scattered all over the country. I believe everyone on the board except for Bruce Siska participated in the earlier hearings that were held on this matter. You should have before you the November 25th letter in which I attempted to summarize the application, where it was and where it is today. We subsequently submitted on December 8th a SASCA survey, which shows essentially that we've moved the shared driveway from the eastern side of the property to the western side of the property. Just a brief summary of the matter before I open it up to any questions. I just want to note that my colleague, my partner, Matt Packman, who worked on this matter since last year, and Linda Margolin, who also participated with me, is on this call, as is our representatives, the lot owner, Mr. Fixel, its architect, Oliver Cole, and his counsel, I believe, David Duke, is also on.
Len, you're breaking up a little bit.
Okay, well, let me speak up a little bit then. Essentially, what's happening here is we've overcome the FAR issue, and we are moving the shared driveway from the eastern side to the west. We're removing the curb cut on the eastern side. It will remain on the east. It will remain a pedestrian easement on behalf and servicing Nature Conservancy has an interest in the oceanfront property. Historically, the background summary is in 1976, the property was approved for a two-lot subdivision with a shared driveway on the eastern side. What we're proposing is to swap some property between 226 and Further Farm to allow the owner of the adjacent eastern parcel to share the vacant parcel that fronts on Georgica Road. And as an accommodation, the owner of the rear lot, Lot 2, is going to relocate his driveway access to his home, which is under construction on the western side. We, in our summary letter of November 25th, we have addressed the traffic, the safety, and the landscape concerns. Believe we've demonstrated that there would be no adverse impact from the location of the shared driveway from the east to the west. We have dealt with any concerns raised by Suffolk County Planning Commission. There will be no Suffolk County Health Department approval necessary. And I believe with respect to other concerns that were raised by the planning board in prior discussions, we've addressed all of those with the Nelson Pope report and the report from the village's engineer. Any driveway design and curb cut will be dealt with from, by the village's highway department with respect to a curb cut application. We're available to answer any questions or deal with any other issues that the board may have at this point. Thank you.
You done speaking, Lenny?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Any of the board members like to speak? Bruce?
Yeah, I know I was not a part of this discussion beforehand, but I have read through the minutes of the previous meetings for this application and the materials that were submitted along with it. So yeah, I just have a couple, I guess, sort of observations and then a couple questions to finish out with. So just overall observations, 50th Lane is, or Further Lane is, a little unique in that it has no road right of way, which means landowners can basically landscape up to their property line, which is the road edge. So I think that's something that we should keep in mind. The property to the west of this new curb cut does have very mature landscaping right up to the edge of the road. Sight lines probably aren't great looking west. I did stand there a couple weeks back, try to gauge sight lines looking east and then sight lines looking west. I know we can't sort of dictate what happens or predict what happens down the line, but I think it's just something to think about, whether landscaping potentially will happen on the 218 lot and how that might affect looking eastbound. I just have a question on the FAR road. What's sort of changed in regards to not requiring a FAR road for these two lots? And then I guess my last question is how, I'm assuming the utilities for lot 226 run down the existing east easement. Are they going to remain there? And how that utility easement may get addressed in the future, if anything happens, and those utilities need to be worked on, repaired, or whatever, in the future, where access might be to get to those and how all that sort of pans out. I just think it's kind of odd for me to put utilities on someone else's property and then how that stuff gets accessed and how all the logistics of that sort of work out.
Len, would you like me to address this?
Well, wait, I since Bruce didn't sit on it, I think if you know what, if you don't mind, could we hear, because I think there may be duplication of some of these questions, Linda. Instead of, unless Kenny, you want me to, instead of answering each one, I thought if we could go through everybody's comments, because a lot of them will be the same comments, and I thought we could, I'll do it any way you want to do it, but.
Yeah, I'd like to, Bruce has been brought up abreast here with all this, and I'm going to go around to all the board members and see what their opinion is on this. I've spent the last 2 days, including this morning up there. I have to agree with Bruce. The utilities are under this road. To maintain them, the homeowner has spotted a fire hydrant at the end of this road. which is the perfect access for fire apparatus. You know, Lenny, I like to be safety issue here. To address the pull-up in front of the garage, this guy's made this existing road to fit his house. The question I have is, all of a sudden, why do we need to do this? I mean, this road has got all the utilities under it, water main, and like Bruce said, to maintain this, if something should happen down the road, you know, what are we doing? Yes, we're repeating probably, Lenny, but this project's been going on over a year, which you know. So if we're going to ask the same question a couple of times, you have to bear with us.
Oh, no, I'm fine. We'll answer each one's questions or observations, however you want to do it. So,
Okay.
Would you like me to do that, Lynn?
yes, Linda, go on.
Okay. So there's an existing written agreement between the owner of Lot 1 and the owner of Lot 2, that Lot 1 will give a written easement to Lot 2 to install and maintain the utilities here, including whatever access is necessary in order to address any future maintenance needs for the utilities. So we expect to record such an easement in connection with the approval, if it's forthcoming, of this lot line change. Because in order to effectuate it, we would have deeds running from both parties to the other, and the easement would be expressed in the deeds. With respect to sightline issues and the possible interference with landscaping, the village code already addresses this, which is to say that even though the village doesn't have title to any shoulders beyond the paved area of Further Lane, the village code and the section dealing with highways empowers the village to control landscaping that interferes with safe use and access of its roadways. My clients certainly don't intend to plant anything that will obscure visibility looking east. And while we don't have the ability to control what the owner of the lot adjacent to the west does, the village certainly does. It's already in the village's code. And so we don't think that that's, A, we don't think it's an issue, and B, we don't think it as an enforcement issue is an issue that actually falls in front of the planning board. Enforcement is a question for the village, not for the planning board.
Could I, Linda and Bruce and Ken, what Ken and Bruce are both asking, Linda, is a more fundamental question. What they're asking is, and I'd like you to respond to this because you negotiated the agreement between the parties. What they're saying is, you're someone who developed a house.
So why do we want to do this?
That's the question.
Okay, fine. I'll be happy to address that.
Okay.
The agreement between these two parties was done with the idea that there would be an advantage to both. The Barron family, which owns considerable property to the east of Lot 1, would be able to add this Lot 1, essentially, which they intend for the moment to remain in its undeveloped state, to what has essentially become a family compound without the separation of an active driveway, which is what there would be if the driveway remained along the easterly edge. And the owner of Lot 2 would gain the advantage of, instead of having a narrow 20-foot flagpole to provide access to the lot, that have a more generous area in which to install a driveway. And the advantage in terms of, there's also an added advantage we think in terms of what the fire apparatus access rules and the fire code will require, because the length of the flagpole going down to lot 2 calls essentially for a midpoint pull-off to allow one piece of fire equipment to pass another. It wouldn't be required with respect to the existing 20-foot flagpole because that predates this rule. But with the new lot line change, it will be required, and there is actually room to do it. So, so from the standpoint of fire safety, it should also improve fire safety access. But the principal advantage that the two lot owners were looking at is, as I said, for the Barron family, it was the ability to create continuousness across lot lines. And for Mr. Fixel, who owns the 226 parcel, the advantage was to have better driveway access.
Both of you,
They made these plans a very long time ago, well before construction started. The application was presented to the planning board for reasons that are revealed from the various minutes and so on and so forth. This application proceeded through many, many meetings and was altered on the basis of pre-application conference to provide for 2 curb cuts, not 1, because of the concern that under the interpretation that the village building inspector was using of the FAR rules at the time, it was going to require a 26-foot wide driveway all the way down to lot 2 if it was a common access. We didn't ever believe that interpretation was correct because it had to do with the number of buildings that would be served by the driveway, and the definition under the state fire code of building in this case is a building, suitable for human habitation, and therefore we didn't think certain buildings counted, but we were trying to accede to the interpretation that the building inspector was then using. The building inspector now has brought his interpretation in line with what we believe is correct, and therefore the use of a common access doesn't require a 26-foot wide driveway. It requires basically a 12-foot wide driveway with a pull-off to allow one piece of equipment to pass another if necessary. And so I hope that answers all of your questions. If there are more, I'm happy to do my best.
if I may, Ken, just interject.
Yes, Walker. Oh, Walker, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to interject something. I always look at an application in terms of what's the story behind the application. These are 2 neighbors who are trying to work together to solve some issues they have as adjoining lot owners. In 1976, there was this narrow access strip. There was the focus on fire apparatus, on safety issues with respect to these estates at the end of these long driveways was not a major concern. Today, we're more focused on that. So I think there certainly is, obviously, there are benefits to the landowners. The benefit to Mr. Barron is that he has now an adjoining contiguous piece of land to his other property. His present intention, although, I can't commit to this, is to maintain this and develop this lot 1 more as a garden, as a place for his grandchildren. Over the last several months since COVID, he and his entire family have been living on their property, and more than ever, he appreciates the fact that he owns this piece of land and wants to remain as open space. That's not to say in the future he may not build something there, but that's his present intention. The benefit to Mr. Fixel, the owner of Lot 2, is, albeit he planted his utilities here to start construction, and because this is taken through no fault of the boards so long to resolve, they want the owner of Lot 2 wants the utilities to remain there, and we have an agreement that's going to cover that. There's also, a benefit to the parties in that, as you notice on the southern boundary, Mr. Fixel gets some additional property down here, which gives him, more expanse to the north. So I always look at the story in terms of, what's the benefits? What's the benefit to the owner? What's the benefit to the village? I think the benefit here with respect to access for fire apparatus is, I think, very important, very significant. It's also a benefit to the owner of Lot 2. And what's the detriment to the village? Well, we're moving it to the west. We're moving the common access to the west. Certainly, the owner of the lot to the west has encroached with their landscaping, but that's something that the village has to deal with. As I pointed out at a prior meeting, the village has the right of enforcement to deal with that, and to have people when they plant right up to the property line, to the road line, to be sure that there isn't an obstruction of view. I noticed most recently the village has done that. For instance, on the corner of Appoquog and La Forest, I see they've had people cut back hedges so that when you pull up to a stop sign, you can see what's coming around the corner. So I think there are positives and there are negatives, but I think it's all part of the story. And I think on balance, this is a fair application. I don't think it's setting any precedent whatsoever in terms of having an adverse impact in the future on the planning board's work. And I would ask you to approve it.
Can I ask
Walker?
a couple
Oh,
questions?
I'm sorry, John, go ahead. One of you go.
Oh, I can't.
Yes, Billy.
John Tauber?
I didn't know. I can't see everybody with the screen sharing, so I didn't know. if
Okay,
somebody else
yeah. Oh, it's Billy, I'm sorry.
Okay. So I just want to clarify a few questions that I have just so the record is straight. There were previously plans submitted, multiple versions of it, by a landscape architect showing the curb cut and the raised or elevated island within the curb cut. Is the applicant still seeking approval for that specific plan, or is the detail of the driveway not, or is there a different? That's what I'm asking. Is that plan still? Are you still asking for approval for that specific plan?
No, we're saying that the details of the driveway will be worked out as necessary with the highway department, as they usually are with respect to any curb cut application.
Yeah, for a single driveway. When
Which is
what are the requirements? I don't know. I mean, I'm not. It's not clear to me that the building inspector changed his interpretation of the fire code. But if he has, do we know what the requirements are for two houses? What the driveway width?
Yeah. So the requirement is there is no building currently planned for Lot 1.
Okay.
And the requirement for so this driveway at the moment is going to serve one single family house on Lot 2. And the requirement for that, or for a driveway that doesn't serve more than 4 buildings being defined in the fire code as inhabited buildings. And we don't think that even if Lot 1 were to be developed, it would have more than one inhabited building on it. But it's a 12-foot wide driveway with, given the length of this driveway, at least one area to pull off where it becomes wider so that one piece of equipment can pass another if necessary. And in addition, I believe, but Oliver Cope, who I believe is on the call, may be better suited to answer this than I do. There may be a requirement due to the driveway's length and the fact that it's a dead end for a turnaround area on lot 2 so that equipment can turn around and exit and doesn't have to back up.
Okay.
Oliver may be able to speak to that more than I, but I believe that those are the requirements of the New York State Fire Code.
Okay.
And they won't ever,
If it goes up, I mean, it's going to serve, ultimately, it's going to serve 2 homes. So
two
what
homes and
what would be the requirement if
a
it's?
driveway that serves 2 homes
Yeah.
does not have to be wider than 12 feet.
Okay, so 12 feet. Okay, that was my
Is that
question.
right, Oliver?
I believe that, I think that we may need 2 pull-offs because you need one every 500 feet. So we'll widen out to 20 feet. And I don't think we'll do a driveway that's only 12 feet anyway. We'll do 14.
Mhm.
But one of the things to keep in mind is the scale of the environs and the community at large. And I'd point out that Further Lane is only 21 feet wide on this stretch.
Okay.
Right.
I just wanted to understand what was required. That's all. That's helpful. And so, but it does seem that you could comply with the state code in the existing 20-foot wide common driveway then. So, okay.
I have one question for Beth. Has the village adopted that road yet? The width of the road, what they're referring to?
The village, if I might say, it's not up to the village. The village long ago was required to adopt the New York State Fire and Building Codes, and any changes to those are automatically imposed on the village.
So I think the question was whether or not Kenny, in his role as the code enforcement officer, has changed his opinion as how to interpret that code section of the fire code. And I believe that he has changed it. However, we haven't finalized exactly what his opinion is. I do believe, in speaking with him, that he did say that it would, this driveway specifically right now would require the turnouts, and that Linda, you had talked about, and Oliver, you had talked about, and that it wasn't the 26-foot wide driveway that we were talking about in the past, or that had been an issue in the previous. So I think as far as this application is concerned right now, I think the need for the driveway, I think it's been addressed, that issue has been addressed. What the final opinion for will be is still in progress. But for this application, I think, as long as the turnouts and the turnaround areas are provided, I think that will satisfy the fire code issue. So.
Thank you.
Is that something we need to have shown on this survey?
No, well, if I may answer, it's my belief the answer is no, because it will be a function of applying for a certificate of occupancy. In other words, a certificate of occupancy won't be granted without a driveway that meets the fire code. So it's really a building department issue. It's not a planning board issue.
Well, you're relocating a common driveway easement that was required by the planning board. Generally speaking, common driveway easements are subject to planning board review. I mean,
No, I'm not talking about the location of the easement.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the fact that
yeah, but we don't.
in other words, if New York State were to change its fire code,
Yeah.
between the time the planning board approves this and the time that Mr. Fixel is ready to seek a CO and require something else, okay? It is what the state fire code is going to require, not what the planning board approves, that's going to govern how this driveway is constructed. And therefore, we we don't think we should be showing driveway details on this lot line change. We think that we should, that those details should be something that the building inspector and enforcing the fire code will be passing on. Oliver, have I misstated?
I have one or two questions. What is the fact that the utilities are under the driveway? Is that an issue in terms of the fire code?
No, it's not. It's not an issue as far as the fire code's concerned. And Linda, to your point, yes, we're subject to the building code for the driveway, and the earlier design, Billy, that was for access to one house and the sole use. So that the location of the gates and those kinds of things don't have any relevance anyway to what we're talking about doing now. One other thing that's worth noting, just again, because I'm very conscious of the scale of the village and the importance of not kind of overdoing it when it comes to this. I think the village code itself, with respect to driveways, if there were a right-of-way, limits the width of the driveway to 14 feet.
Yeah, it does.
So that's more of a scale issue, but I want to make sure that, again, to give context to what we're talking about doing, we don't want to make a big statement here. We've addressed safety multiple times as far as sight lines, with the Nelson Pope report and Drew Bennett's review of it.
I still believe the map needs to show the easement, because that's a document that would be required by the planning board, right?
I'm sorry, if you were saying that we need to identify the area to the west as the area on which an easement is going to be imposed, yes, I agree with you. To that extent, this drawing is deficient.
Okay. Yeah, I wasn't talking about the improvements. I was just.
You're just saying that this is the area that's subject to the easement for lot one to take access, and it will be restricted. Yes, we fully expect that we'll be required to record a covenant that will say that, and we can note that on the drawing.
That would be I assume that would be a condition of approval if the matter is approved. The covenant which you would want to review, and the map. I mean, there are conditions under which the map has to be filed, I guess, right? Beth, isn't?
Right.
I mean, right, a subdivision map. Right. Okay.
I just want to say, as far as reviewing, I think, and maybe the applicant wants to address this a little more if the board has questions regarding the board's jurisdiction to review a prior determination. Subdivision requires the change in circumstances, and maybe the applicant can address what specifically are the change in circumstances here that would give the planning board the jurisdiction to modify a prior board's approval. I think that is one of the things that maybe we can discuss a little more.
I would be happy to. Linda is going to deal with it, but I think from 1976 to the present, one of the change in circumstances is we've become much more aware of fire safety and access. And I think that's pretty significant when you have a driveway this long. I think that's a major, probably the most significant issue, after public water, after all of these years now, we're focusing on safety with all the new equipment that's available, with sprinklers in homes and the like. I think that's a significant change in circumstances. Linda, you want to address any of the other issues?
Yes, well, sure. Let me just say that one of the reasons that New York State has changed its rules on fire apparatus access is because firefighting equipment has become bigger. And what the size and the width of equipment in 1976, including even ambulances and other emergency equipment that are not firefighting, they've become wider. And if so the existing 20-foot wide flagpole, which Mr. Fixel couldn't make any wider, doesn't actually allow for safe passage for one piece of equipment to pass another, or for and there was no room mandated for a turnaround either. So there was no room on this 20-foot wide strip to do the two pull-off areas because they wouldn't be wide enough. And the other, I would say the fact that the Barron family has acquired the parcels adjacent to the east certainly does represent a change in circumstances for the property owners. This is not a variance application, and the question is that change shouldn't be discounted because it's equivalent to what a zoning board might call a self-created hardship. It is an actual change in circumstances. The property owner of Lot 1 is affiliated and essentially controlled in the same family with the property adjacent to the east. And therefore, that's another change in circumstances. So we think, all things considered, that those two things provide sufficient justification for the planning board to revisit its earlier determination. I will say that we've looked hard at everything about why this easement was located on the east to begin with. And the choice of location at that time appears to have been, as best I can tell, how can I say this? Arbitrary. They were going to put it on one side or another, and for some reason, they chose the east side. There isn't any indication in the file that it was chosen for reasons of safety or its distance from 2 Mile Hollow Road.
I would add that I have known the Barron family for many years, long before they bought their property. And they have assembled a substantial amount of property to build a family compound with homes on this property for their children and grandchildren. I think you're going to ultimately see that in and of itself is a change of circumstances. I don't think the concept of assemblage, as we see it today for family compounds, which has been significantly enhanced by the COVID pandemic. You find today clients who are coming out to East Hampton, who are allowing their children and grandchildren to occupy their homes, and they are renting homes to provide a safe environment for their families. This concept of assemblage, of providing for family compounds, for quarantined areas and the like, is, I think, a change in circumstances. And what the Barron family has done is assembled all of this property, not just for a family compound, but for open space as well. As part of the agreement with the Fixels, they have relinquished certain access to the beach over the Fixel property because they already have access to the beach over their own property. And I think, although it hasn't been discussed because it's a current historical event, COVID has changed people's thinking about their properties and how they want their properties to be developed and the like. Recently we were before the zoning board in connection with property on Appoquod, where a family came out and bought a significant amount of property from 3 different parties to assemble a family compound and are restoring a historically significant home in the village rather than demolishing it and tearing it down for open space. You know, there's a whole new concept going on in the village, and I think this is also part of it. And this sets a very good message out to the public that you don't have to chop things up anymore. The people are reassembling it. So,
Yeah, but this application was put in before COVID. I mean, it's good that
No, it
we're
was,
talking about.
no, absolutely. But the concept of the family, of the family compound.
I agree with you, Lenny, but
No, I'm just
this
saying.
application goes back a long ways, and
I know, but it's more. No, Ken, I agree with you, but there's more focus and emphasis by Barron to try to do whatever has to be done to accomplish it. That's all. I mean,
I can say that I agree. I understand the family compound aspect, but my concern here is that this lot is going to remain a separate lot. It's not going to be something that he's merging into his adjacent lots. This is its own subdivision. It's not part of the other lots next door. So my concern is, you know, the change in circumstancing, focusing on his properties adjacent, I don't necessarily feel play in as far as, unless he was proposing to merge this into those lots, then maybe that would be something that would be a change in circumstances.
He certainly would if he was allowed to build on this lot, because this lot will probably eventually provide for a home for not his children, because he has land for them, but for grandchildren. I mean, potentially, but we can't allow that. We can't do that, can we? I mean,
Can I just ask Attorney Baldwin a question? Are you suggesting that a greater cognizance of fire safety and what it requires is not sufficient
my only
change in
concern with that is
circumstances?
the laws change. That's every single subdivision basically in the village then, because the laws changed for everyone. So laws change all the time. And so I think I'm just trying to, you know, I just want to make sure that whatever the board decides, that, you know, this is really the first step in that establishing that change of circumstances that allows the board to make their decision.
Well, let me just point out that I think there are 2 different issues here. One was discussed quite a bit previously when we were asking to abandon the restriction on a single curb cut for these 2 properties. And I think the board was very concerned at that time about whether or not they were going to set a precedent for another application. Because we understand that those restrictions are designed to prevent a proliferation of curb cuts and to preserve essentially a more rural appearance and cut down on potential traffic conflicts. That there are a number of salutary purposes served by covenants that restrict subdivisions to a single access point. We're no longer asking for relief from that condition. And the only condition that we're asking for relief from in the original subdivision approval is the location of the single access point. And in that respect, the changes in circumstances that pertain to this application are unique. They're not shared by any other parcel in the village. That is to say, we have 2 different circumstances. One is the fact that Lot 1 is owned by an adjacent landowner who wants essentially to use it as part of a family compound as open space. And the other is that relocating the access to the west, together with the additional width that the property owners have agreed on, will allow and indeed mandate that these properties provide a fire access compatible roadway, which could not have been required if we weren't asking for relief from the location covenant. Because as I think everybody is aware, if we weren't seeking to change the subdivision lines, Mr. Fixel could build a 12-foot wide driveway right down the 20-foot strip. He wouldn't have to provide a turnaround. He wouldn't have to provide any pull-offs, because if there's a subdivision approval or a site plan approval that predates the fire access rules, then you're not bound by them. So I don't think that these circumstances are necessarily replicated on any other lot, and that they are unique to this. And because we're not asking for relief from the shared access, I don't think it will in any way provide it won't be a roadmap for any other application. Any other application would have to establish why, if the single curb cut is already located, why they think it ought to be relocated.
Can any other board member want to talk about this? John Tarbert?
No, it's been on the agenda for a long time.
No.
I'm satisfied with what's there and being proposed. The only thing I'm not sure about is a turnaround at the terminus of this driveway. Is there a possibility for fire equipment to turn around there?
Oliver, do you want to address that?
There is a considerable amount of, I'd say, flexibility for fire apparatus to arrive and position itself around the property and turn around and depart. And we did an analysis and have laid this out, and I don't think we're going to see any kind of issue. Again, I think this is something that we should be addressing through the building code and the specific requirements. There are diagrams and things that are specific to these kinds of things. It's in there, and ultimately I have to work it out with Ken. But I've done the layouts, and I don't think we'll have an issue. And we're actually happy to work it through with the fire department too at the time, make sure everybody's comfortable.
Bruce?
Yeah, I've got a question. Could Linda or Lenny, could you guys talk about the access or the pedestrian easement from 50th Lane all the way down to the Nature Conservancy? Is that something that needs to remain open? Does that need to remain accessible to the public? How does that, what exactly is
You mean
that?
further lane? You mean further?
I'm sorry.
The Nature Conservancy has a pedestrian easement
Right.
to reach its property. We don't think they've actually ever used it, because it's far easier to go and park at the parking lot at 2 Mile Hollow. But that pedestrian easement will not be obstructed, and therefore, I mean, that's the reason we believe you haven't heard from the Nature Conservancy, which certainly got notice of this application. So if they want to walk all the way down, they will be able to. But anytime they want to, no one intends to obstruct their passage. Typically, when you have a pedestrian easement that runs over a 20-foot wide parcel, you don't actually have to leave the entire 20 feet open. It needs to be open for sufficient pedestrian passage, but the burdened property can do something with that 20-foot wide. It doesn't all have to remain open, as long as people can walk back and forth. Does that address your question?
So essentially, they will have access, or somebody could potentially have access from further lane down the 20-foot east side easement through both properties and get to the Oceanside lot.
Yes,
No.
Yes, that's a
no lot
described,
involving-
that's a described easement. I notified Nancy Kelly of these hearings. I never got a response. I've dealt with pedestrian easements numerous times with Nature Conservancy. If we're not going to obstruct them, we're not going to put up a gate that prevents them from coming in. They'll have the same access that they've had since 1976. That's for 44 years. There's never been a question of access. Usually what Nature Conservancy does is they make an appointment with the lot owner, the oceanfront lot owner, to visit the property. That's what they've done with me on numerous further lane properties. And they usually visit the property from the beach. They usually they don't want to come through there. So, we've dealt with that. And I think that, that answers it. Okay.
And one minor note while we're over on the easement, we have noted on the Saska's plan, the utility easement, it is called out. I just didn't.
Right.
People thought perhaps that was an oversight, but it's there.
Could I ask that we close the hearing and move forward with a determination on this matter?
I'd like to leave it open. Attorney, Beth?
For what purpose leave it open?
Well, because Billy wants the updated map on that. I'd like to see that. I'd just like to leave it open. Walker, you got anything else more you want to
Yeah,
say?
I had one question. We spent a lot of time discussing the sight line upon egress of the driveway. Has that been addressed? It has been a while, so forgive me if I'm addressing something that's been covered.
the report from Nelson and Pope that said that sightlines were adequate for traffic departing in both directions from the driveway was concurred in by the village's engineer, Drew Bennett. Those documents were on file with the village planning board. I think some part in maybe by June of 2019.
Okay.
Is O'Brien here or no?
I'm here.
O'Brien, what's your input on this?
My objections to the western driveway are on the record, and there's nothing that's been presented in that changes my conclusions. I know that Nelson and Pope had their report. I know that there was agreement from the village that was sufficiently researched. I personally never agreed with those conclusions, and nothing has changed my opinion on that. So my thoughts are on the record. Nothing's changed.
I have to agree. I mean, when we looked at this project a long time ago, the biggest safety issue, we stood at the bottom of that hill going towards Tuma Hollow, that intersection, and I sat down there yesterday and I've sat down there again this morning. That line of vision coming up over that hill with those trees on that intersection, I've from the beginning, I've spoke about this, that intersection and how that lays out there. I don't like it, but however, that's why I'm trying to poll the positions of the board members here to see what there is. Bruce, you got anything to add to this or?
Yeah, I'd have to agree on that. The new curb cut is at the bottom of that hill, just west of that sort of intersection of 2 Mile Hollow. And Kenny, as you know, if you ride your bike, you used to do that. I used to do that. Seriously,
I know. You come over the hill.
You come over the hill. It's a dangerous spot. I've sat down there also and just sort of watched cars and pedestrians go by. And, I have to agree. It is in that hollow, the sight line to the west. I know we have no jurisdiction over landscaping and any of that, but I think it is a dangerous spot. Going eastbound, also going westbound.
I would just like to point out that we had a supplemental report done by Nelson and Polk that specifically analyzed.
We had that from the beginning.
With
We
bicycle
know
traffic.
that, but we just,
We know that from
common
the
sense
beginning.
says we've been there,
Well,
we've
wait.
stood there, we've watched it, and we don't happen, some of us, I personally, don't agree.
Well, then, Ken, then what's the point of continuing? Why don't you just close the hearing, take a vote, and do whatever you're going to do? But why prolong this any longer? I mean, if there is not sufficient a vote here, then you should deny the application. But we need to move on. We can't continue going back and forth over this. We had to deal with the FAR. We had to deal with FOIL under COVID. We're here to make a notation on a map could be a condition of a
I don't
determination.
think that COVID is relevant to what we're discussing, Mr. Ackerman.
not
Really, it's not,
No. I'm asking you now to close the record and make a vote. Why prolong this? If you're going to deny it, then deny it. But why prolong this? I'm asking the chairman to poll to see if there are sufficient votes to deny it or pass it. But there's no point in continuing this. You don't need a hearing to have another hearing unless you've got some basis for continuing the hearing. The basis of making a notation on a map is that's a ministerial act that's done in the course of providing the village attorney with the easement documents and all the other conditions that are necessary to comply with a final determination. But if this board is going to deny it, then let them deny it. Let us move on already.
Ken, I'd like to understand something if I can. The idea of the utilities being on the eastern end, that seems like an issue that I'm not really clear we're all understanding in terms of its impact currently or in the future. I just would like some clarification on that as far as what the other board members think.
No, I agree, O'Brien. That's sort of what I was talking about in the beginning. I agree with that.
I feel like we have not during the course of this meeting focused on that, and we're getting off on these sidetracks. Mr. Ackerman, it's very nice for people who can have big family compounds, but those are not issues of our concern. We're talking about things that are of our concern, and one of them is, brought up early in this meeting, but we never really went anywhere with it, and that is the issue of the utilities under that eastern current access road. And so I don't feel like we are clear on that. And I don't see any point in getting distracted by some of this other stuff about, what families are fortunate enough to have the big family compounds and what the factors are that are involved there. If we could just stick to the point of the utility issue and get some consensus on what those factors are, I would appreciate that, because I myself am not clear on that.
Mr. Chairman, if I could say something on that point to provide some clarification.
Go ahead.
Okay. So the issue of where utilities are located in relation to a lot that's being developed is of concern to the Suffolk County Department of Health, which will require an easement in a form that they dictate with respect to the ability to place and maintain the water supply to the lot in question. Otherwise, there is nothing I am aware of in the state code or the village code that dictates that utilities that serve a developed lot have to be on the property of that lot. And in fact, if you look at various subdivisions that have been approved in the village, you will see that it is not uncommon for utilities to traverse a lot that does not belong to the lot that's being served by the utilities. One that I'm personally familiar with is the Cartier subdivision that resulted in the village getting the historic house as its property, and the property in the rear remained in private ownership, and the utilities serving the privately owned lot traversed the lot that went to the village. I worked on that some years back, so I know about that, but I believe there are many others. If the planning board were to go back and look at the many subdivisions that it's approved over the years, you would see that it's not unusual to, how can I say this? To basically group all of the utility access in a single strip that serves multiple lots, and the single strip may belong to a single property owner.
Excuse me, but I would just like to question that comparison, because that Cartier property on Main Street, the access you're talking about is where the Historical Society is, if I'm
Yes,
correct?
ma'am.
Okay, so there really is no other option. In that circumstance for the Cartier property, there would have been no other option for them to access their property behind the Historical Society property, were they not to work out a negotiation of that access over the Historical Society property. This is an entirely different circumstance where there is more than sufficient property to look at alternatives.
Well, when Mr.
Okay.
Fixel began construction,
Let's focus on this.
this was
piece of property.
this was his only option.
Okay, so let's, Beth,
Yes.
we should close this hearing out.
Yeah, you also have to address the secra. I don't know if you want to figure out what we're going to do about secra. We haven't addressed secra yet either.
We addressed it today. I mean, why delay any further for
I don't think it's necessary if the board,
Right.
I don't think it's necessary to keep the record open just to have an updated map. I think that can be addressed as a condition.
Lenny and Linda, sorry to interrupt, but it's Oliver. I'm remain disturbed by discussion of sightlines and the rejection of not only expert reports from Nelson Pope on the subject of automobile traffic and bicycles, as well as the rejection of the concurrence from the village's own consultant, Drew Bennett. And I find it an unfortunate part of the world today that facts are being rejected and people are supplanting them with their own opinions. And while I value the opinions and input of the board in terms of framing this whole discussion, the idea that you would say, we value our own opinion when you have no professional experience in this over that of professionals in the context of the greater world is very unfortunate. And Lenny's letter makes the point that there are no other facts before the board than those presented by the experts. And you should be careful of it.
Oliver, let them close the hearing and let them vote. And it is what it is, okay? There's no point in lecturing here. Let's have a vote and let's see where the vote is. Let's see where the vote comes out.
All right.
Okay, any other questions before I close this hearing? Okay, make a motion to close the hearing.
I'll make that motion.
Now we need to poll.
I'd like there to be a poll.
Okay. Ann?
Is there a
Jamie,
second to close the hearing?
Second, I thought I'd move to close, but someone.
And we're polling the board to close the hearing? Is that what you're saying?
Polling the board to make the vote.
Ken Westberg,
No.
Oberon Farber,
No,
John Tarbett,
Yes.
Bruce Siska,
No.
Walker Wainwright.
No.
Okay, you have your decision.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right. Is there anything else to bring before the board before I make a motion to close the hearing in the board meeting?
can I
No,
ask
it's on
a
the
question?
agenda.
Go ahead, Auburn. I don't see you, but go ahead.
I don't understand what happened when Lenny Ackerman first came on. This is a technology question, maybe. The survey map came up on my screen and the images of all the other board members disappeared.
That's
Did
why I
that
didn't know where
happen
you
to
were.
everybody?
Yes.
Yes, he shared his screen.
He shares his screen. When you share people can share their screens to put up different documents. And then you'll have to, it shrinks the people, the number of people you can see. So,
Oh,
like, I can
okay.
see
So
6 people, but when a screen isn't shared, I can see a lot more.
when
Yeah, that's correct. I didn't know you were
once
here,
that
Auburn. I'm
happened-
sorry.
once that happened, I was only able to see the person who was talking.
Right. And then you can still scroll through and see other people, but what's actually displayed all the time will just be, depending on what type of technology you're on. Like I'm on a laptop, so I can see 6 people right now. If you're on your phone or something, you might only be able to see 1 or 2. It depends.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry.
Is there anything else?
Nope.
I have a motion to close it. The
I'll
meeting.
make that motion.
I have a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Bye.
Meeting's now closed. Thank you for everybody. Happy holidays.
Thanks, guys.
Happy holidays to you
Thank
all.
you.